Everyone thinks the Knights Templar were basically pirates with better PR. A bunch of warrior monks sitting on a colossal treasure chest filled with gold, the Holy Grail, and probably the Ark of the Covenant for good measure. The story begins around 1119, with a handful of knights dedicating themselves to protecting pilgrims in the Holy Land. They were the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. Emphasis on poor. Their original seal even depicted two knights riding a single horse to show just how broke they were. It's a fantastic origin story, humble, pious, noble. And like most fantastic origin stories, it's about to get complicated by the one thing that complicates everything: ridiculous, unimaginable amounts of money. So, how did these poor knights become the medieval equivalent of a multinational investment bank? They didn't find a treasure map, they invented a system. A pilgrim heading to Jerusalem didn't want to carry a giant sack of gold because getting robbed on the road was practically a scheduled tourist activity. The Templars offered a solution. You could deposit your gold at the London Temple, get a coded piece of paper, a letter of credit, and then cash it in when you arrived safely in Jerusalem. They created the first international checking system. It was genius, it was secure, and they charged a fee for it, naturally. This, not some buried chest, was the foundation of their staggering wealth. They weren't treasure hunters, they were innovators in financial services. This banking system exploded. Soon, the Templars owned a massive network of over 9,000 properties, from farms and vineyards in France to entire islands like Cyprus. They had their own fleet of ships, which not only moved money but also dominated trade in the Mediterranean. They were exempt from local taxes, answered only to the Pope, and operated as the de facto treasury for most of Europe's royalty. Their fortune wasn't a pile of coins, it was a diversified portfolio of land, businesses, infrastructure, and massive loans owed to them by literally everyone who mattered. They were less a holy order and more the world's first too-big-to-fail corporation, complete with their own private army. What could possibly go wrong? Enter King Philip IV of France, a man with expensive tastes, a string of costly wars, and a checking account that was permanently in the red. And guess who his primary creditor was? That's right, the Knights Templar. When you owe your bank an amount of money that could generously be described as a kingdom, you have a few options. You could raise taxes, cut spending, or, declare your bankers to be devil-worshipping heretics and seize all their assets. Philip, ever the innovator in fiscal policy, went with option 3. It was the most audacious act of identity theft and debt consolidation in history. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, yes, that Friday the 13th, Philip's plan went into motion. In a stunningly coordinated operation across France, his men arrested thousands of Templars, including the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. The charges were a laundry list of medieval hysteria: spitting on the cross, worshipping a severed head named Baphomet, institutionalized sodomy. It was all very shocking and conveniently impossible to disprove. It didn't matter if it was true. The goal wasn't justice, it was a hostile takeover. The public relations campaign was just as important as the military one. After all, you can't just tell people you're liquidating your bankers because you're bad with money. Here's where the treasure hunters get excited. While Philip's men were busy kicking in doors, something strange happened at the main Templar port of La Rochelle. The entire Templar fleet, rumored to be carrying the order's liquid assets and important documents, slipped out of the harbor the night before the arrests and vanished. Just gone. This is the seed of every great Templar treasure theory. Did they go to Scotland to help Robert the Bruce? Did they found Switzerland? Did they sail to America and bury treasure on Oak Island? The last one is a bit of a stretch, seeing as it involved crossing the Atlantic a century and a half before Columbus, but hey, it makes for great television. Meanwhile, the arrested Templars were being subjected to what historians gently call enhanced interrogation. In reality, it was brutal, systematic torture. Unsurprisingly, hundreds of knights confessed to every bizarre charge thrown at them. It's amazing what you'll admit to when your feet are being slow roasted over a fire. Grand Master Jacques de Molay confessed, then recanted, then confessed again. The whole process was a legal and moral sham. Finally, in 1314, as he was being burned at the stake in Paris, de Molay famously recanted his confession for the last time, proclaiming the order's innocence and supposedly cursing King Philip and the Pope, both of whom, incidentally, were dead within the year. Just another coincidence, I'm sure. So, Philip got his hands on the Templar assets, right? Well, sort of. He seized their lands and castles in France, but the legendary treasure, the gold, silver, and jewels, was conspicuously absent. After years of legal wrangling, the Pope ordered that most of the Templar property should be transferred to their main rivals, the Knights Hospitaller. Philip managed to skim a huge amount off the top to cover his expenses for conducting the trials, which is like a hitman charging the victim's family for the bullets. But the vast liquid wealth, the treasure that could be moved by that missing fleet, was never officially found. It didn't end up in the French treasury, and it certainly wasn't sitting in a vault for Philip to count. The treasure had, in effect, disappeared. Perhaps the most boring, and therefore most likely, theory is about Switzerland. In the early 14th century, the Swiss Confederation was just starting to become a thing. It was a mountainous, defensible region full of mercenaries who valued independence and, more importantly, discretion. It's fascinating how, shortly after the Templars were disbanded, Swiss banking began its rise, built on principles of secrecy and neutrality that the Templars themselves had perfected. Did the surviving Templar treasurers, with their financial knowledge and portable wealth, simply relocate and set up shop under a new name? Instead of burying their gold on an island, they might have just created the numbered Swiss bank account, the ultimate hidden treasure. The obsession with a physical treasure misses the point entirely. The Templars' true fortune was their system. It was the knowledge of international finance, logistics, and how to build a state within a state. That knowledge didn't just vanish when Jacques de Molay was executed. It seeped into other organizations. Surviving knights in Portugal simply changed their name to the Order of Christ and kept their assets, even funding Portugal's Age of Discovery. In Scotland, they integrated with local knightly orders. The people and their expertise were the treasure, and they were absorbed, not lost. The myth of a buried chest is just a much better story than a complex tale of asset reallocation and intellectual capital transfer. Humans prefer pirates to accountants. In the end, the destruction of the Knights Templar wasn't a righteous crusade against heresy. It was the brutal, efficient dismantling of a creditor by a desperate, powerful debtor. Philip IV didn't uncover a conspiracy, he manufactured one to solve a crippling cash flow problem. The great hidden Templar fortune wasn't buried in a cave. It was on paper, in ledgers, in deeds, and in the system they built. That fortune wasn't stolen in a single night. It was dissolved, transferred, and rebranded over decades. The greatest treasure story in history might just be a 700-year-old lesson on why you should never, ever lend money to a king who has a bigger army than you do. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!